I'm never really good at talking into the mic. Hi everyone, welcome to Deep Tech Melbourne. This is our last meetup for the year, so it's a pretty exciting time for us. We'll have lots of more exciting talks in the new year. First of all, I just want to say thank you to my co-organisers for the year. I've got Ray and Fee and Priya who are not here. So big thank you. We are just a group of nerds who had a WhatsApp group chat called Deep Tech that we turned into a meetup. So welcome. I just want to say hand over to Aika, who's here from Stone and Chalk, to say a little intro about what they do here, and also thank you for hosting us this year. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sally. Welcome all of you. And before we start, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we were gathered today, because of one of the people of the Cool Nation, and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and there's always was and always will be Aboriginal land we gathered on. Yeah, let me tell you, this is also, I think, Stone and Chalk's last event for the year, so that we're hosting here. So I'll give you a quick overview of what we do at Stone and Chalk. So we're a non-for-profit that exists to support startups and scale-ups in emerging tech. So you can see over there, on this wall, in this hub, we have about 60 startups and scale-ups, and we help them with programs around funding, community, expertise, and talent, and help all of the individual founders support them in their journey. And we have also 2 other hubs in Sydney and 1 in Adelaide, and offer space. Also, there's 2 levels of co-working on top of here for all of the startups. So warm welcome again, and if any of you knows of any startups or are in any startups that are looking for a new home, please get in touch, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Michael. And also, I see a lot of new faces and then a lot of old faces here today, so welcome to those who are new. Please spread the word and share with your friends, and tell everyone about what we're doing. I don't know why the sponsor image is not showing up on there.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, now it is. So I just want to hand over to Rhythm from Akula Tech. Thank you so much for sponsoring tonight. The pizza and beers and everything like that are from Akula, so I'm just going to hand over and let you do a little intro.
Thank you again, and thank you so much for coming out today and being here with us. I'm Rhythm from Akula. We are a technology development company, and we specialize in space, defense, and green energy. And having to witness the industry so closely, we know that the tech has the power to actually make positive impact and change human lives. And we are seeing, witnessing closely that right now it has been crazy. Things are changing so much. Technology has been creating so many opportunities and possibilities, and everyone wants a piece of it, and everyone wants to ride the wave together. But we also know that we can't do this alone. This is not a solo mission. And we are aware that there is magic when industries come together and create something. And we are all about hearing your stories, your ideas, and whatever that you want to say. So feel free to reach out and have a conversation, and we'll see if we have anything cool that we can, team up together and come up with something nice. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm just going to hand over to our first speaker for the night, Sarah Dodds. Sarah is a self-proclaimed light enthusiast and deep tech nerd, and so is going to present all on her work with Christmas lights. So we thought it would be extra fitting leading up to the holiday season.
Thank you. So hi everybody. When Fee told me that there was a deep tech meetup I had to come and get involved with you guys. I've worked for startups, I've co-founded a startup, I'm a director on a startup, all in the deep tech, science, innovations, science invention space. So deep love for this system, and where this talk came from, and we'll get the, now I need to get the
You might
screen.
need to tap your laptop to bring it back to.
And I've got to, hang on, we've just got a
Yeah,
little
we've
bit
got
of,
to do the
Slick.
old school.
you can make deep technology.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Oh,
I
you
think
might
this is gonna
you
work.
might just.
Can you get it on the? You got it on the cast as well.
What did you do with PowerPoint to get it to do the
Presenter mode?
the present the
Here it
because
is.
it's sharing the presenter screen on this side.
It's sharing the laptop screen.
Ah, just duplicate. So while she's doing that, we had a little thing happen in Melbourne back in 2020 called COVID. And we were all here, and Melbourne went into one of the longest lockdowns in the world, and we did various crazy things to keep us sanity. For me, I'd been doing Christmas lights of the board in the shop type for 22 years, and had been eyeing off some of the work that was coming out of the US and people going into this new technology called pixels for a while. Had access to online shopping. All of this stuff you have to buy custom from China. And spent the lockdown basically working out how to do synchronised Christmas light and music shows. What does that look like? This is what my house will look like in about 2 hours tonight and every night between now and Christmas. I don't think we've got sound, but that's all right.
Is it unmuted?
Is the TV the
TV.
TV might
That's
be
all right.
muted.
You get the...
Go nerds, sort it out.
It's actually singing jingle bells. In the bottom of that. In the main big white lunchbox. Thank you. So what Fee asked me to come and do tonight was to actually walk you through what it takes to put one of these shows together. First of all, if you've ever had any ambitions in this direction, get someone to talk you out of it. You will never have spare time in your life again. But what you can actually do as a consumer with technology in coming up with your own products, doing a go-to-market, doing a go-live, doing hypercare, all of the stuff we do in startups is actually in evidence in what it takes to put one of these shows together. You need hackers, you need hipsters, you need hustlers. And what I'll do, I'll go as fast or as slow as you like through this next bit. But if you've got questions, butt in, and I'm very comfortable to pause and answer. So what I'm going to talk about is what does the Christmas lights tech stack look like? If you're going to put one of these shows together, what is your palette and the many different forms of lighting that you can use to build your own custom show? How do you control it? How do you program up the sequences? Some of the crazy things that people are doing that I've actually drawn the line with, and I didn't have time, but there's some delightful photos of people's roofs being ripped off by putting too much weight up on the roof. But people do go a lot further down this pathway than I do. And then some useful websites, if my previous disclaimer has not talked you out of wanting to perhaps think about exploring this space a bit further. So, the 3 H's for a startup team, I'm pretty sure you guys, let me come and stand across this side so everyone can see. You need a hacker. You have to build the electronics yourself. There is nobody that can do it for you. You can only buy these components in parts from China, and you have to build the electronics, you have to build the control systems, you have to actually push pixels into props yourself. You need a hipster because sadly there are some people that don't have this skill, but you actually need to choreograph your lights once you've built them to music, and you have to make it interesting and something that people want to watch. And then you need a hustler because you need to manage your neighbours' expectations. You need to think about socials. You need to think about what you're going to do about YouTube. You're going to have to think about how you engage your local community. So It's not so different from a startup, and interestingly, we all also fundraise. So there's about 20 people in Melbourne that do this, and we all know each other. Really delightful open source community. Okay, so how do we get rid of that at the top? We don't need that. Okay, so if we start at the bottom layer of the stack, layer 0, you're essentially looking at blinking lights. It's all 5 volt or 12 volt, and it comes in the form of, well, you can get the shop bought Christmas lights that have a transformer that come at the power plug. These are pixels, which are the basic building block of your Christmas light show. Happy to hand them round. You're going to get better at soldering. You've got to put your own connections. Thank you. You've got to put your own connections on them. There's mini seed pixels, which you can actually get with a return wire, so you can run a one-way hub from the middle of something that goes outwards, which I've got one of. For other people, these are things that go in theatres as moving head spotlights. People put these on their roofs in racks of 5 or 6 across the top of the roof, and then have to deal with helicopters going past, actually going through the beams and worrying about whether they're going to have the Civil Aviation Authority worried about them. You've got your shop inflatables, so you can run those through relays, and then you've got a thing called Neon Flex. Different things you can put together in different ways. One of the things I do is I take old-fashioned Christmas shop lights on frames, you know, the big picture ones, as they die, and I turn them into something I can control by computer. It's my way of recycling, but there's lots of different ways of doing it. So how do you make a bunch of pixels that look like that interesting? There are people around who will sell you shapes with holes in them so that you can make candy canes, you can make a Christmas tree, you can make a tune to sign. They come in up to 3,000 pixel versions in terms of how many they'll take. And yes, you have to build your own support system. They don't come with any architectural reinforcement. 3,000 pixels in the back of one of these weighs a ton. And people put these on top of their houses. The biggest one I've seen is actually 1.5 stories high. This is a world of insanity, and people who are both perfectionists and highly competitive, but also supposedly doing it for fun as a hobby. But we do like it. So this is the preferred support for most people is actually electrical conduit. So you can use the T's and the frames and the end pieces to actually build a frame, and then you actually hang it on your house. I'm going to skip to crazy and come back. Every July, those of us in Melbourne that do this actually have our own little mini convention, and it is a weekend of complete geekhood. We talk about the bugs we've had, we talk about the new things that are coming on the market. This thing over here is a fobble machine. A fobble is a bubble filled with fog. Really pretty when you bounce coloured lights off it, but you have to actually buy the deflecting liquid or the bubble liquid, and then you have a smoke machine. So it's a smoke machine and a bubble machine all brought into one. There are people with smoke machines. There's a guy in Tasmania who has a flamethrower that he puts up every Halloween. This is what your standard smoke machine looks like. So if you go down to Grange Road Lights down in Sandringham, Mikey down there has about 3,000 people a night that come to see his show. He has full-on traffic management, councils involved, and he has about 3 people in his front yard with 3 of these and 10 litres of snow foam a night. And anybody who comes up to the front fence, his whole nature strip and the area is covered in foam. I never want to have that many people coming into my lights. If you guys remember Get on the Beers when we came out of lockdown, and the video that went around about that, that's Grange Road Lights down in Sandringham. Mikey is insane. He's in the entertainment industry. He's got access to stuff that the rest of us don't, and he does crazy stuff with it. And yes, when you get those pixel shapes, the core flute prop shapes that come, you spend a lot of your winter sitting there pushing pixels into props and actually getting them into shapes and then putting them onto reinforcing frames. So I think I took that last June as I was starting to put together some of the edging strips. Big bucket of pixels, and this is the edging that keeps it all straight, and you literally sit there with pixel pliers and push them in one at a time. And then you solder the connections on the end. Everything is custom, but there are kind of some standards involved in making things a bit easier. there are 4 different connector types, and you need to know when you buy. If you buy pixels with connectors on them, you need to know which connector type is coming with it. It's also really useful. So some of them are male, some are female in different ways. These are all waterproof. The whole point of these light systems is once we've built them and got them installed out in the garden, all the weather we've had in Melbourne doesn't matter. My show runs in rain, it runs in wind. There's a few people up in Queensland with Cyclone Jasper bearing down who are a little bit worried, but they're actually worried about the wind more than they're worried about the rain. But if anything goes wrong, you have to break the waterproof seals to fix stuff. So when it's raining, we kind of all sit at a standstill, and whatever's not working stays not working until the rain stops. So each pixel is about half a watt, and the circuits, you can have up to 7.5 amps running through them at either 5 volts or 12 volts. You get to calculate how much current that is per light. You can turn the brightness up and down. You can turn that up in the controller settings so it's always limited. You can turn it up and down in individual tracks to make things brighter or dimmer. You get to calculate whether you're going to blow the fuse or not. And fuses come, fortunately, in packets of about 100, and I probably go through 100 of them a year. Because unfortunately, once one goes, you tend to get a cascading chain going all the way up, and you blow every fuse that's involved in the circuit. If the magic smoke escapes, it doesn't work anymore. So you need to do some thinking about how do you actually make sure it stays under 7.5 amps, make sure that you don't plug a 5 volt circuit into a 12 volt power supply. But there are no safety rails, there are no systems in place. You build your own engineering safeguards, and you build in as few or as many of them as you're comfortable working with. You have to power inject every time you run out of power, so you have a 12 volt or a 5 volt power supply that runs this, and they come up to, I work with power supplies up to 600 watts. You can actually get the HP server power supplies that go up to 2.2 kilowatts, and some people have quite large supply boxes with those in it, but essentially you need to get power distributed out to everywhere you've got pixels. So if you go to see one of these shows, you're probably going to see a lot of black wires snaking across the ground to get from wherever the power and wherever the controller is to actually where the pixels are located. Lots of maths, which is good, and there's actually some people who've also come up with websites that help you do the maths. So I won't show that to you tonight, but you can tell it how many pixels you've got, what the voltage is, whether you're running them at 100% brightness, and it'll actually tell you at what points and where you want to power inject, and it'll tell you whether it's going to work or not. Okay, so we have our blinky lights which are doing the rounds. Something has to tell the blinky lights when to turn on and off, and that is going to be your controller. So controllers come in 3 different types. You can have relays, which is a straight on-off circuit break, circuit open, so circuit close, circuit open, circuit close, circuit open. You can have these things. So this is a DMX controller. That's designed for 4-wire red, green, blue sets going out into a whole set of wires where everything is controlled as a single unit. So I have some big signs that have the word Mary on them, and that's got one of these controllers running it, because Mary is either going to be red, green or blue or some combination of them. These are the controllers, so they're WS2811 controllers that actually run pixels. So these guys have 3 wires. There's a voltage plus, voltage minus, and a data line that goes down the middle, and you can run up to 1,000 pixels on one of those, as long as you can get enough power out to them. These run with Raspberry Pis or BeagleBones. I have 12 Raspberry Pis running across my garden. And again, if you want to have a look, this is what one of them looks like in action. So that's a 3-channel pixel controller, sits inside a waterproof control box. That one runs on Wi-Fi, so I actually run my entire show on a network with the 12 distributed Raspberry Pis. All of the control signals are downloaded to all 12 Pis, and there's basically just synchronization packets going around the network telling them where it's up to in the song and what it is, and so it knows what it needs to do. Other people have something that looks more like this. This one has a BeagleBone, which sits in the middle of it, and this one runs 3 channels. This one runs 48 channels, each of 1,000 pixels. So if you're happy to have the wires going everywhere from a central point in your garden, you can put one of those in. I made a very early design decision that I didn't want to have wires all over the grass because mowing cables doesn't work very well. So I actually use Wi-Fi, and then I have distributed power points around the side of the house, and I can actually get power to where it needs to be without actually crossing anywhere that gets mowed. And you can see the rack of fuses along here. So there's 3 fuses. There's 3 fuse slots across the top of that one, and then there's 16 fuses across the bottom of that. Does that all kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the dumb part of it, right? This is just going channel 142, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off, go bright, go dim. The fun starts when we get into the next layer. So this is now that Raspberry Pi has an SD card in it, and that SD card in it has an operating system and software called FPP, which stands for Falcon Pi Player. Its only purpose in the entire world is to control Christmas light shows. There is a group of people with a semi-open source model across the world that actually keep the software up to date, that debug it, that make sure it works with all of the different technology that comes in downstream of it. And when you set one of these up, you assign it an IP address, and you then talk to it over that IP address, whether it's wired or whether it's wireless. And you can basically set the time of day. You can download all of the control signals to it so that it knows what to do. All right, that's the hacker part. That's pretty much getting to how do you turn things on and off and what do you turn on and off. Now we move to the hipster and how do you make it pretty. So we make it pretty using some wonderful software which is also open source, which is called Xlights. It has a global community, it has open forums, it has volunteers that man support rooms, particularly all the way through December. They're actually running 24/7 across people in the US, people in Australia and people in the UK. Australians have actually had a lot to do with the creation of the software and the new forms that come together in it. They do somewhere around about 20 new releases a year to update the software, fix bugs and put out new features of it. I'm going to show you a demo of what it looks like. So this is the Xlights software, and we start with the controller page up at the top. So you can see here, this is the list I have of my 12 controllers. And if I click on one of those, then let's have a look at that one. So this is the matrix that goes on my garage door. That runs one of those little Raspberry Pi capes that's going around the room. And that's got 1,680 pixels on it that's divided into 2 channels. So the left hand of the door and the right hand of the door. And they're connected to the 2 ports. So what's going to happen is I do all of my programming, all of my things and making it all pretty in this software, and then I go and tell it to talk to Falcon Pi Player, and it downloads everything it needs to in machine language, machine code basically, to those controllers. This is the second tab. Let me close that. That's gone off the screen. That is not helpful. Okay, this is the layout. So this is the front of my house. So every prop I have has been loaded into this with the number of pixels, with the arrangement of them. You can see I've got a couple of Coro props. I've got a giant set of wings that's got 1,000 pixels in it down by the front gate. There's that matrix I was talking about that sits on the front of the garage. I've got leaping arches that run along the front fence. Those straight line edges you were talking about earlier are now the verticals along the side of the house. And I've got what's called a mega tree sitting down the front, except I've got a very small mega tree. Mine is only 1.5 metres high, and they come up to about 6 or 7 metres high when people get a bit serious about them, which I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to. But essentially when you go into these, each of these elements is assigned. So I've got these little trees across the front fence. Each of them is assigned to a controller. Each of them has a start channel. It knows how many channels are in it, and it knows where it stops and the next one starts. There's about 30,000 control channels in that setup, just to give you an idea of where it gets to, and the complexity that gets managed that you don't need to think about, which is really cool. Once you've got this set up and your layout's there, you never actually really need to think about it again. So the fun starts and the hipster bit starts when you go to sequences. So this is what the sequencing tab looks like. Every element that you've got in that previous layout gets its own row. There is a whole palette of different things you can do. You can do colour changes, you can do bars, you can do spirals, you can choose the colour scheme that you want, you can put a textured background across it, and you can put twinkly lights up. And then you basically have a music track that's going across the top. This one is Jingle Bells, and for each of the elements there you decide what it's going to do. Fortunately, you can actually do things as whole of house groups, but you can also then go into the detail of an individual prop. So my little singing trees along here, I like putting Santa hats on them. So I actually have to put a special effect that says just the top third of that, and we're going to make it look pretty. And if I click on one of these, what are we going to do? Let's have a look at this one. It'll actually play what that model is looking like. So you get a little animation of what that piece is doing, and you also get what the whole show is doing at that point in time. It takes about 20 hours for each song that we sequence. So a 3-minute song using this will take about 20 hours to actually do the work behind it. The fun starts when we then decide we want to make things sing. When you want to make something sing, you download the lyrics track as a text block from somewhere on the internet. You then have to break the text down into phrases and work out where every phrase sits along this timeline by listening to it. You then break each phrase down into words and put the word in the right place along it. And then you break each word down to the phonemes or the mouth shapes that go with it. And then you actually match those with the actual syllables of the words of the song. Fortunately, somebody who likes AI has worked out how to do it. And they now have a website where you can go, here is my audio track, here are the lyrics texts, and you upload it, and 5 minutes later it will send you back this little track. If we zoom into it, you can see there's actual individual, over the fields we go is actually turned into the actual phonemes that correspond to different shapes. And then back in that layout tab, there are 12 different standard phonemes, and you have to actually work out what shape, what pixels you're going to light up for each one of those phonemes. If you want the eyes to go left and right, then you have to decide all of those as models as well, and then you have to decide when it looks left and when it looks right. OCD is an advantage, and I don't have it, unfortunately. But that's essentially, if you're going to see somebody's lights and you want to know how they've done it, you can see along here I've got Woody. So the tree on the right is called Woody, and he's a natural pine tree, as voiced by somebody who sounds a little bit like Tom Hanks. And then on the left I've got Liberatree, who's an artificial tree and likes everything sparkly. But you can see that the eyes are asleep, the eyes are open, the eyes are asleep. Can I? So there's Liberatree, who's been nicely animated, who's singing the words to Jingle Bells, and his eyes do different things at different points in time in the song. But that's a model. There's a model for the eyes, there's a face that's doing the face, there's the lyrics track, and all three of those kind of have to come together. Any questions on that? Other than, why would you do this to yourself?
After listening to Jingle Bells for 20 hours, do you still like Jingle Bells?
You choose songs very carefully that you like. It's the Glee version of Jingle Bells, which I do actually rather like, and I do actually still like. Okay, so these are the 12 mouth shapes that you get. So they're standard design phonemes, and you can see here you actually determine within the model what pixel numbers turn on and off, and you can actually choose what colour they're going to turn on and off at. So Woody's got green eyes, Liberatree's got blue eyes. Laboratory's got a rainbow around the outside, and Woody's got a natural pine thing around the outside. So yeah, that's one of my new favourite websites, and it's free. They say, please buy me a cup of coffee, but all of the things that come with this in the Christmas lights thing are essentially free. Make a donation if you think it's actually helped you, and you'd like to support them to have them keep doing it. I send out a number of donation checks or donation transfers at the end of the season. So, how do I do scripts? I have an intro script for my show. It used to be my teenage son. My teenage son doesn't want to do that anymore, and I use ChatGPT to actually generate the script. Please write me an introduction script between an artificial tree and a natural Christmas tree. How do we know who's going to do the best job of actually introducing a Christmas light? So, ChatGPT will do it, and it's not bad. I then found a service called Jenny, which actually provides the voices, and I've assigned both Laboratory and Woody's voice to a Gen AI voice. And by the way, one of them sounds awfully like that Gemini demo that Google have put up. I heard it for the first time and went, I've heard that voice. I've heard that voice a lot. But you can essentially have a dialogue between two completely artificial generated AI voices, reasonable job of timing. It's only going to get better over time. But I figured for the moment that gave me something for this year's show that I can edit, that I can re-record if I need to, without having to go back to increasingly scarce human resources who really aren't interested in contributing. And this is what the Jenny thing looks like. So I've got a voice called Tom who does Woody, and a guy called Samuel who does Laboratory and is appropriately LGBTI, which also makes me happy, particularly when he malfunctioned and my son came back with, yeah, it's always the gays who are after the attention. As he went manic, sparkly in multiple colours, and it's like, it's not the plain green tree who's going to behave itself, it's the one that's supposed to be sparkly that just would not do what he was told. So you can see the timeline across the bottom of the two of them actually having a dialogue, and everything's broken up into phrases. So, the next bit, what I've introduced this year, which is new, is a jukebox function. So thanks to somebody else in this open community, they've come up with a free website that has a remote control for those Falcon Pi players that sit inside the boxes, that you can now scan a QR code at my fence, and it will take you to a website which I'll show you. And if there's not a show playing at the time, you can choose from about 15 tracks as to which one you'd like to listen to, and it will fire the whole show up just for you, and you can have a listen to it. Or you can put it into a photo mode of one of 4 different colours, and it'll actually set all the lights up so that you can take some nice selfies. So this is what the show page looks like if you come and scan my front fence. So it's got some information about the show. It's got we do fundraise for domestic violence and safe steps, because we thought that I couldn't stand the thought of anybody not being safe and not having a good time at Christmas, particularly kids who needed to get somewhere safer. The show's not playing at the moment, so it's in coming soon mode. It will turn on at 8 o'clock, so we're not quite at the time for it yet. Once it turns on at 8 o'clock, there'll be a list of songs that come up, and you can literally click. It does a location services check. You have to be at the front fence, so nobody can actually hack my show from Houston or London or anywhere else and actually make it play remotely. You have to actually be within half a kilometre of the show itself, and then it will play for you. And you can vote for us at the Melbourne Christmas Light Search if you think that the show is particularly cool. And then we have socials along the bottom. So there's an Insta channel, there's a YouTube channel, there's Facebook. And this is the very, very cool bit I get behind the scene, which is I get a dashboard. So I know by date who's turned up. Where are we? So how many people have actually come and put on the QR code by date? How many unique viewers are there? How many total viewers are there by date? So we had 25 people there on Saturday night choosing songs. And which requests were selected on what date? And which one is the most popular?
What is it? Jingle bells.
It is indeed Jingle Bells, but it's starting to get some competition from Santa Shark. And if any of you have small children, you know what an earworm that is for anybody under the age of 4.
So like Baby Shark?
It is Baby Shark, the Santa version.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm expecting. Jingle Bells are used for testing. Santa Shark is completely generated by people outside who wanted to have a look at it. And my daughter, who's in the front bedroom, is probably going to go nuts sometime between now and Christmas. So yeah, that was just a bit about make sure you tell your neighbours. Surprises in anything to do with tech are never good. Surprising your neighbours with lots of street traffic and loud noises at 10 and 11 o'clock at night never goes down well. There's the horror stories about people being shut down. It only takes one complaint to council about the noise and you're shut down. And nobody wants that when you've been working on it for as long as we work on these things to get them up. So you advertise on all of the Christmas light sites around Melbourne. There's 2 or 3 of those. It's got a web page, we've got YouTube, we've got socials. And what a year looks like. It starts in January when we take down last year's show, and then in February we start building new stuff. We build new stuff all the way through autumn and winter until August, and the weather starts improving a bit, and at that point we go to our computers and we start sequencing. I have a full-time job. I look after the Advanced Analytics and AI team at GHD, so I have a fairly full-on full-time job, and I get about 4 hours a week that I can actually spend on this, or television time and anything, although I don't think I've watched television in the last 12 months because this has taken over. In October we start the install. It takes about 20 hours to do the install, so I have a crew that come with me and help put things up, and there's people who now have their own special jobs. James puts the star 5 metres off the background, 5 metres off the ground, up at the top of the tree. Jenny comes and actually she now owns those leaping arches along the front fence. But there is a lot to do to actually pull everything out of the roof, stack it up. It all has to be flat packed. That was one of the home requirements. So it's got to be put back together, assembled into shape, mounted in the garden, connected up with the wiring, turned on, watching it not work in test mode, swearing loudly, figuring out what's not working and repairing it. November, debugging. Unit test, integration testing, pre-go live testing, hypercare, go live. Every year there is something unexpected that goes wrong, and in this you can be the only person in the world that's got the particular problem that you're experiencing, which is what happened to me last year with a particular power draw problem on a Raspberry Pi that was killing a sound system, that was killing services, that was killing the show at random intervals. You are on your own because it's custom and there is nobody who knows more about your show than you do. Kind of like IPM patents, right? You have to do it yourself. December, go live, hypercare. 2 weeks of people going, yay, how did you do that? That was really clever, but that took you a week or 2. Being home every night in case there's problem. We had a fire last week, which was not good. One of the pixels actually malfunctioned. It's very rare, but it does happen. Don't put pixels up against weatherboards or timber. Mine are all out on brick, and we actually had a pixel that overheated, caught fire, melted the plastic, melted the support. Took about 2 hours to fix, which is fine, but a little bit scary. But then you get kids who come and dance in the driveways and neighbours who come and say, that's really cool. Then you have Christmas Day and turn it off. Then you collapse into a screaming heap for a week, going, I'm never doing this again. Then January, you tear it all down, and then the support group gets together about how was your Christmas, how was your Christmas, how was your Christmas, wasn't that cool, wasn't that wonderful? And then you go back into February and then you start again for the next year. So I've gone from 3,000 to 6,000 to 9,000 pixels over the 3 years that I've been running. Probably spending about $5,000 a year on the show, on all the things that do to it as you actually upgrade it and get it going. Serious labour of love. Wonderful seeing their smiles on their faces in December. Every year I go, why do I do this? But I think like many people in startups, doing something that you didn't know how to do, mastering a new set of skills, getting a gorgeous result at the end of it, for me that kind of makes it all worthwhile. So if you'd like to do this, step 1, get someone to talk you out of it. It is a money pit. It is a time pit. If you still manage to get past A and you're interested, there is a really warm, welcoming, supportive global community. We now have some suppliers in Australia as well as China, which is fabulous. There is a Facebook group, and there's 3 Facebook groups. Xlite have forums, there are sequence vendors, there are places you can buy stuff from to actually shortcut your start in the first year. There is a wonderful website called Oz Christmas Lighting, and that has everybody in Australia on it who does this, and there's maybe a couple of hundred of us. It also has a listing of every display that does this in Australia. So if you want to find one somewhere near where you live, that's the place to look. If you're down near Cranbourne, you're in luck because there's 10 people down there that do it. There is a ridiculous community in the outer southeastern suburbs. And every July we get together for 2 days and commiserate, talk, explore what's possible with the new technology that comes out every year. And that's kind of what the show looks like when it's put together and up in action. So thank you for listening.
Do we have time for questions or not?
Thank you. I just thought I'd pass to the crowd to see if anyone has any questions. But first of all, I ended up on Halloween around that time on a bit of a TikTok algorithm with all the Halloween lights and people playing crazy songs, like metal songs with the faces and the pumpkins, and I had no idea. So it's actually so cool to see how it's actually all built from start to finish. So any questions from anyone? Aika?
I've one question. If money wouldn't be an obstacle, what would you add to your setup?
So if money's not an obstacle, what would you add?
I have an arbiter of good taste who says no snow machines, no fobble machines, no mounted spotlights up on the roof. So I've probably gone about as far as I want to go. I'd like to get permanently mounted lights on the outside of the house. The ones I've got there have been up for about 10 years, and I need to replace them with something that sits in channel and looks a bit nicer. I'd love one of those 3,000 pixel mega things, but I've got nowhere to put it. So the house has probably reached the limit of what it's capable of. Oh no, that's not true. I've got a 7 centimetre spacing matrix of that matrix on the garage, which has got 1,680 pixels on it. I'd like to take that up to about 12,000 and get enough television resolution on that you can actually play video footage on it, which you can do. You can get it to VGA.
Just wondering, like, if you are, what do you do with all the hardware afterwards? Like, you mentioned you're buying quite a few things every year, but
It has to flat pack. It goes up in the roof into storage.
right. So is there a little bit of a community around reselling some of that stuff so that other hobbyists?
There is a little bit. Once you're into this, you seem to be in it for life. So sadly, most of the ones that are for sale is because somebody's died. There's a lot of older retired gentlemen who do this, who have been engineers or done something technical in their working life or been tradies. So there's more in the US. There's a little bit in Australia where you can buy it, and every few years it's the exception rather than the rule. But yeah, you can at times. But if you're going to buy it interstate, they won't ship it. You're actually going to have to drive a truck up and pick it up and bring it back.
Right. Okay. So
Build it yourself.
yeah, I guess I won't be getting a Godzilla theme.
But you can start right with one of those Raspberry Pis, one of those little boards, and a couple of strings of 100 pixels. Put them into a prop and just put something standalone. You could start with a single thing that you could do a face or a balloon or something as a single Christmas prop.
Have you ever explored wearables instead of?
Yes, I have a Santa hat that I made myself, which is wearable electronics about 5 years ago. That was before I got into this stuff, and it was probably the precursor to it. So that was Arduino Lillipad. So yes, there are also people that you can get RFID bracelets that can connect to your show and will actually splash in time to your show. Some people sell them as fundraisers. I have a problem with that from the recycling perspective. But yeah, there are people that do wearables.
I think that's all we have time for questions, but there'll be opportunities at the end when we all mingle. I just want to hand over to Melbourne from Navi Technologies. Sarah, if you could please help me put that. So Morgan and I have actually met before. We're doing a very similar thing in our jobs where we're taking science and working in hospitals and trying to apply machine learning and AI, or maybe not so much, as we'll hear, to different technologies. And so Morgan, I would like to hand over to you to talk about all things at Navi.
Thanks. I'm so tempted to talk about mechanical keyboards instead of this after watching Sarah's presentation. You know, that's the hobby I have, but try to stick to this. My name is Mubin. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at a early stage, not so early stage, but a startup company from Melbourne called Navi Medical Technologies. At Navi, our vision is to create brighter, healthier features for critically ill children. Basically, a fancy way of saying we build medical devices to improve care for sick children. Today, I'd like to talk about the journey that we took as a bunch of founders and students, and coming out of uni and creating this startup and reaching the point that we are at now. I'd like to talk about the problem we're solving, the solution that we're building, and also some of the challenges that we have faced. It may not be as exciting as Sarah's presentation, but I'll try my best.
It's more useful, much more meaningful.
I know. Should I just control myself?
Yeah, if you just press up and down from here.
So a quick, next to the speaker.
So apologies guys, I'm going to have to go because I have a Christmas light show turning on in 35 minutes, and I actually can't be there when it goes on, which is the story of my December and why you shouldn't do this.
All right.
I keep going laughing. It's all right, they're just going to grab my laptop now.
No worries. Yeah, I'll just quickly go through my career summary. So I'm a biomedical engineer. I did my master's degree from University of Melbourne in 2015. Graduated in 2017 and worked as a research engineer in Heart Research at Murdoch Children's Research Institute, which is where I worked a lot of AI image processing stuff. Murdoch Children's Research Institute is located within the Royal Children's Hospital, and concurrently, while I was doing my degree and working at the RCH, or Murdoch Children's Research Institute, I co-founded Navi, and I'm currently the CTO. I'd like to talk about the journey, like why I was doing it, then how I was doing it while I was studying. But it's an interesting journey, so let me move to the next slide. Okay, so this is the Navi founding team. We actually have 6 co-founders, very unusual, or I don't know, it might be usual, but back then when we started a company, a lot of different people in the domain said that if you have a relatively big company, it's going to be very hard for you to manage a lot of different things. It's quite risky. But here we are, 7-8 years later, we're still ticking, and we have done a lot of things since then. But interestingly, when I was in uni, in 2016, the University of Melbourne introduced a course called Biodesign Innovation. And the purpose of that course was to bring together students from the School of Engineering that were doing biomedical engineering and students from Melbourne Business Schools who were doing part-time MBAs. And the purpose was for them to form a cohort where a bunch of teams would come out. The teams would have advice from a bunch of different clinicians around Melbourne, clinicians from pediatrics, cardiology, respiratory. There was a lot of different clinicians that were part of that course. So the purpose of the course was pretty simple. You go out, you talk to more clinicians, nurses, doctors, and figure out the problems and unmet needs in the medical domain. They call it the biodesign approach. And once you have found a problem that you're really passionate about or you want to really solve, you come up with a solution, and then you present a business case as part of the course. Now, for us, once we graduated from that course and eventually our degrees, we took a break, came back together, and actually decided to form a company out of it, mainly because the team that we had built as part of the course, we really enjoyed working together, and also the need that we were solving, the unmet need that was in the neonatology and pediatric domain, was so urgent and was so needed by different people around the world that we were like, okay, this is something that we really got to work on. So we had some motivation from there. In about 2018, we got serious, started joining a lot of accelerator programs, and I think I was was telling, you know, was talking about it, but you know, we were at Stone and Chalk in 2019 as part of one of the accelerator programs here called Actuator. Stone and Chalk used to be in the good shape then. But yeah, anyways, 2018 is when we all went full-time, or 3 of us went full-time, and the rest of the founders were part-time. Since then, we have done 3 clinical studies. We have studied about 150 patients at the Royal Women's Hospital in the neonatal intensive care unit. We have done more than 200 clinician interviews across Australia and US, different hospitals, children's, neonatal, 30 plus product demonstration, and had developed multiple iterations. I'll talk about all that in a bit, but we have raised about more than $10 million so far, and we have 12 people in the team now. So I think from like considering that we started as students from classroom and getting to this point, I think I feel really good that we have been able to reach this point, and you know, we still have the same people that were involved from the very start. But now to the actual bit. So what are we trying to do? So the problem that we're trying to solve has to do with something called a central venous catheter. Central venous catheters are basically thin flexible tubes that are inserted either via the arms or via the legs, any of the limbs, to get access to the heart. And the purpose is to deliver medications, nutrients, and fluids directly to the heart, because there's so much turbulence in there that you can easily, that the medication can easily get transmitted throughout the body and at a pretty quicker time frame compared to, if you're getting it through nasogastric tubes or feeding it directly through the mouth. So that's the purpose of the central venous tube. But problem with placing central venous catheters is that it's done under the skin, so it's a blind procedure. So the way it works is that the clinicians would do some sort of guesswork to figure out how much they're going to be inserting the catheter in. And when they think they're in the right spot, based on haptic feedback, some of the blood returns, and a few other things that the clinicians do, they'll call for an X-ray. When the X-ray comes in, it can take about an hour depending on the time of the day. If the X-ray says it's not in the right spot, which could happen about 40-50% of the time, we'll have to sometimes adjust the line or completely remove it and introduce a new line, and, redo the procedure, and it's just back to square one. So there's a lot of frustration involved with this procedure. There's also, because you're doing multiple X-rays to re-verify if it's in the right spot, there's a lot of ionizing radiations that you're providing, putting on to the patient. And if you think about newborn babies, premature babies specifically, who require these lines in emergency care, and they mostly get it through their umbilicus. It's quite important because the first hour is a golden hour where they need urgent care, and because of this shortcoming, a lot of the time that care is delayed. It's pretty bad for the baby because it can easily get fatal. Okay, so that's one problem. The other problem is that even when the line is in the right spot, it has been secured, and now the X-ray says it's in the right spot, about 28 to 75% of the time, in just the first week, the line migrates into a suboptimal location. Now this is even worse because by this point, they have started delivering drugs and medications which are toxic, and they're only intended for that particular area of the body. So if, let's say, the tip goes too high, like it gets gets into the heart, it can actually inflate the heart's outer layer and cause something called cardiac tamponade, which can require serious intervention and could lead to death. There are a lot of other complications that could arise because of this migration problem. The issue is that there is no current way of knowing if the tip is in the right spot, and the recommended way of checking for it is you do an X-ray every day, which is also dangerous because you're blasting a baby with radiations pretty much every day, and it's not good for them. It's ionizing radiations. So this is where we come in. The system we're creating is called the neonat ECG tip location system. We are trying to solve the problem of the lack of real-time feedback, and the way we do it is through a technique called intravascular ECG. How many of you know what an ECG is here? It's all right, not a lot of people. ECG is short for electrocardiogram, and it's the electrical activity associated with the heart. So when your heart pumps, it's basically an electromechanical chamber. Brain is sending a bunch of electrical signals, and you can actually pick those signals up if you put certain electrodes in certain positions on the patient's body, and you can use that to diagnose a bunch of different things. You can actually use that to diagnose heart blocks and heart attacks, but that's not what we're doing here. what we are doing is that we are converting one of the surface electrodes, or we're converting the catheter into one of the surface electrodes. So what happens is that as the catheter moves closer to the heart, we get different characteristics, and we pick that up and send it back to our machine, and we have a smart algorithm there that recognizes the changes. And based on that, it's able to say whether the tip is in the right spot or incorrect spot, and that's how you get the real-time feedback. Any questions so far? Cool.
And I mean, do you actually get like a visual imagery, or you don't get a visual?
No, at the moment. So we talked to a bunch of users, and they just wanted 3 colors: red, blue, red and green, basically just 2 colors. And we still display waveforms if they want to make their own judgment. But yeah, just red and green is what they're after, and not where it is in the body. Because there are basically 3 things that they want to know: whether they're in the right spot, whether they're too deep into the heart, or whether they're too short or in an unintended vessel. Once they know that, it's so much easier for them to just move the catheter in the right spot. The way we pick up the signals to the catheter, I think that's a very interesting part, because we don't put anything on the catheter. The catheter is off the shelf. The device can work with any central venous catheter for any patient, not just newborns, pediatrics, even adults. What we do is we attach something called a catheter connector, which we renamed it to the neonat ECG adapter. Don't ask me why, it's just the connector makes it so much harder for the documentation, because sometimes you'd be saying the connector connects to the cable. It just becomes a tongue twister. But the neonat ECG adapter, it's a very simple piece of equipment. It's a dumb equipment. What it does is that it attaches to the proximal end of the catheter, and clinicians normally flush saline through the catheter. So it makes the catheter an electrically conductive probe, which as it moves through the heart or through the vessel, you get different signals. But this adapter converts the saline column or the saline signal that we're getting through the tip of the catheter into electrical signal. So there's basically a tipping electrode inside that converts the ionic current into an electric current. It's just a piece of metal, it's nothing fancy. And that goes back to an acquisition unit that sits next to the patient, and that does some sort of processing, but then it then gets passed to the console where we have the software. Does that make it clear?
How does it decide what is the right position? Because it's a single dimensional reading, isn't it?
Yes, so it's coming from the catheter, but it's also comparing the signal with an electrode that's placed on the body. So there's still a written pathway. There are 3 electrodes placed on the body. We still get the normal surface ECG, but then we also use one of the electrodes to compare the signal against that. Now the way it decides, it's based on the algorithm. And that's what I want to talk about is, we have developed an algorithm based on a lot of clinical data that we label with X-rays or X-ray interpretations, and then we were able to use that to, run the system. We have a remote as well, as requested by the users. We've done a lot of user interviews that were like, it was awesome if I was able to place the line, but at the same time control the console. So I put in a 3-button remote that has a sterile cover on it, and you can use it in a sterile field because it's a sterile procedure. You can't put the console in the bed itself, so it's much easier to have a remote. But now I'd like to talk about some of the challenges. Okay, so in theory, it sounds very straightforward, right? Like you have an algorithm which is basically looking at a lookup table of a lot of ECG segments that are labeled with different tip locations and making a decision based on, which one matches based on what you're getting in live, right? But getting that data has been the bane of my existence. I think I've lost a lot of hair because of that. A lot of my hair has been gray. You can't see them, but they're there. But I would have had a fuller head if it wasn't for that. But there were 3 to 4 challenges that really bothered us and really, slowed down our journey. The first one was the hospital approval hurdles. Now, when you're trying to collect data from a hospital, or when you're trying to do anything in a hospital, you need to go through multiple committees from the submission all the way to recruitment. A lot of different departments have to look at your application and approve it before you can actually use the data for anything at all. So in our case, we worked at the Royal Women's Hospital, and there were a lot of these different departments that our application went through. So you had the research governance, which looks at the research side of the protocol, the scientific validity. Do we have any agreements with the hospital, et cetera, et cetera? That took some time. We had the HRAC, which is the Hospital Research and Ethics Committee. Just looks at the ethical implication of the study. occupational hazard, obviously, from introducing anything into a clinical setting, there are bound to be occupational hazards, and how do you, mitigate those? You have to talk about that. Infection control, it's a sterile procedure. There's always risk of infection. How do you prevent that? You have to notify the TGA, which is the regulatory body that regulates medical devices in Australia. Clinical database entry and receipt, you have to file a, it's part of it's mandatory now for you to file your clinical trial into a database. And then you have to wait for them to give you a receipt, and then you give it back to the HREC, and then you can run the study. So convoluted, but the final one, which I would like to call the final boss, was the BME approval, which we underestimated a lot. So BME stands for biomedical engineering. So there's a biomedical engineering, and I'm a biomedical engineer, and I'm so sad how long it took. But biomedical engineering departments are the final sort of gatekeepers before you can actually start recruiting, because they make sure that the device is safe themselves before you can use that in a study. So this is how one of our studies timeline looked like. So you can see that the HREG and RTO reviews, they were relatively quicker, about 2 to 3 months, and the TGA database entry, which is occupational hazard and infection control, were like 1 to 2 months extra. And the BME review really took the toll. Like that was easily 7 to 8 months. And okay, for a big company, 7 to 8 months might not be nothing. They could be focusing on the product. But for a startup like ourselves, who's running on burn rate, that's pretty massive. 7 to 8 months multiplied by, I don't know, if you use 50K, that's still a lot of money that you're just bleeding, considering you have limited money. But that was how it was. With some of these problems, what I wanted to do was talk about the problems and talk about the solutions as well that we have been able to implement. We haven't been able to find a really good solution that would work with the approval hurdles. You just can't go through red tape unless someone really close in one of these departments that can help you speed it up. In our case, we have put some agreements with the Royal Women's Hospital to ensure that in the next study that we're trying to get approved, the BME approvals are faster, but I'm not holding my breath for that. Okay, so navigating data capture in ICU. So once we started patient recruitment, one of the biggest challenges for us was, so we were basically collecting data from umbilical venous lines, which are placed in premature babies or newborn babies. So babies, as they're born, if they're premature or if they need emergency care, these are the babies that are eligible for these lines. Now the issue is that these babies are born all the time, right? These procedures are done, like 300 procedures done in a year, and most of the time, these procedures are done at night. So there's no planning. Sorry, there is planning, but there's a very small window for you to know that the procedure is happening and you have to get there. It's mostly at night. So that made it so difficult for us to get to the actual procedure and collect the data, because what would happen is that, if you would get a call, we'd only have like a 20-minute window to get there before they start the procedure, because it's an emergency procedure. They can't delay it because of a study. But a lot of the times, the nurses just wouldn't call us. They would forget about it. Like there's a big sticker on the bed saying, please call us, the neonat study. If you see there's an umbilical venous line getting in. So that was very frustrating. Fortunately, some of us who don't have lives live nearby, and the latest the latest data capture that I did was at like 1 a.m. when when twins were born. Was the awesome night of my life, because the data we got was super awesome. But I was there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and just there, just collecting data, enjoying my life, I guess. I guess you got to do that if you're a founder. We have nurses now, but initially we didn't have any nurses. We were like 6 people, and 2 of us were just going in to collect the data. I went in because I lived close by. There are a few things that we did to make sure we can collect more data. One of the things was that, so this is the line insertion procedure that I'm talking about, when the line is actually being introduced into the patient, right? So these are very time-sensitive procedures, and they have to be done in an emergency setting. But what we also did was we wrote in the protocol that as the line has been placed and it has been sutured, we'll come in every day, and you can come in at any time run or connect our device and collect the data. It's awesome because we were getting more ECG data. And lastly, the thing that we did was when the line was being removed, because the line stays, it has delivered its care, and now it's time for removing. We said, okay, that's the time will come in. Now the good thing about line removals, for the emergency removals, they can be done within a relatively bigger time window, and the nurses were more responsive because most of the time it was during the day. So we went in for the line removal. The thing was that with line insertion, we needed data at every centimeter of the catheter depth. But with the removal, you can still get that because it's in the right spot and you're just pulling back and you're stopping. And because it wasn't done by a doctor, it was less stressful, and I'm not saying doctors are more stressful, but this is a stressful procedure. It was done by a nurse, and because it was less stressful, it was easy to ask the nurse to stop at certain points. So data quality was really high. So that's the data capturing stuff. The next one was we got the data. What problems we had then? One of the biggest problems we had was data labeling disparities. So as you saw that we had multiple ways of collecting the data: insertion, adjustment, removal, and spot checks. Adjustment is basically when they do an X-ray after the insertion, they figure out that the line is not in the right spot and they have to adjust it. That's another way for us to collect the data. The issue was that we were only able to label 24% of our data with X-rays, so the ground truth. So for machine learning nerds, you would know that you have a data set and you need to label it with ground truth. We didn't have ground truth for everything. Only 24% of our data set had the ground truth, and that was because we couldn't add X-rays as part of our study because it's ionizing radiation. So we could only rely on the X-rays that were done clinically. For insertions, as you can see, most of the X-rays were done clinically because they do it to confirm the tip location. But for spot checks and removals, you basically had to get lucky. I mean, I shouldn't say that because they would only do an X-ray if they found there was a problem with the baby and they had to look at their chest. And we would get lucky in that. I shouldn't say that. But as you can see, there's a big disparity. We were only able to get a certain amount of data, and that's a big issue. People who are in data science would know that when you have a missing label, there are so many different ways you can label them. But what do you do when you have clinical data that's not out there, and it's sort of a new thing? What we were able to do, we were able to do a few things. One was that we were able to, we don't want to use the word interpolate, but basically predict what the locations would be for a lot of the data, and that was based on, so for example, if an insertion was done or if a removal was done, we would have the whole image, and we would know the centimeter readings for that, but we also took different ECG recordings at different centimeter readings as the line was going in. So we can look at the X-ray screen and we can correlate the anatomy with the ECG data. So it wasn't one-to-one, but it was indirect, but you could still be relatively confident in saying that it's very likely that that particular anatomical part in the X-ray belongs to an ECG segment that we took at 5 centimeters, 4 centimeters. So that was one of the ways we filled in the gaps. The other way was we did some lit reviews and found people have collected similar data sets, and we used that information to label our data sets. So we basically had 2-tiered data sets. One high tier or tier 1 data set was where we had actual labels, and tier 2 was the one where we did lit reviews and all the other stuff. So basically we had to figure out which one to use for development and testing. One of the things that we're doing now for our next study, which has already started, is we have introduced bedside ultrasound. So one of the other ways you can actually get the ground truth is by doing point-of-care ultrasound, and point-of-care ultrasound doesn't require someone to come in. It doesn't have ionizing radiations, so it's not unsafe for the patient. It's just a few extra minutes after the procedure where you can put a probe and figure out where the line is. And we have been using that to increase our data set, and that data set has been really good, and we've been able to use that for training rather than training. We have been able to use that for testing rather than training. The last problem, pivoting from machine learning to traditional methods. So we started with machine learning approach, training the data and testing it. But there was a big issue from a regulatory point of view, because when we presented our data to the FDA as part of something called a pre-submission, which is not a submission, but a meeting that you can do before submitting your device, FDA had concerns about data integrity. They still haven't put in a final guidance around how they regulate machine learning applications unless something has changed in the past few months. Black box is a big black box for them. Because they don't know what's happening inside, they're really hesitant in approving devices like that. And what they ask for is that you have a really strong data pipeline. For our particular application, this meant that you don't just collect data from one hospital. You go to 10 different hospitals and collect as much data as you can. You can't rely on just 100 data, even though it's 100 data points, even though it's statistically significant. You still go out, you collect 500 more data points from different hospitals. It took us 1 year to get approvals and 1 year to actually collect like just 50 patients. Imagine if you were to go to different hospitals. So that was one of the reasons we had to pivot. But the other one was that they wanted a validated prototype to be put in the clinical setting to collect the data. When I say validated prototype, this means that basically the final device that you're going to be putting into the market has to be the one that collects the data. Now, it was quite impossible for us to do that because we were using the data to develop the device. So we had no way of using that and sort of retrospectively change the data. There are ways to work around these. We now know that. But because we had already gone through the clinical studies and we had already collected data and we had met FDA afterwards, this was a big shock for us. So we had to pivot and we went for traditional statistical methods. We weren't able to get the same level of accuracy, but it was still pretty good and pretty close to what the clinicians wanted. And just dealt with a bunch of thresholds that we derived statistically. Put in a very obscure meme there, but I hope you get the idea. Lastly, just wanted to show that with the 3 clinical studies that we have done so far and 200 user interviews, we have gone through 3+ product iterations, and these are the major ones. So initially, when we had just graduated from the university and we were in year 1, we had this lunchbox prototype where you can see that there's still some leads that are visible. It was tested, but it wasn't good enough for a clinical setting. So we did a lot of animal studies and benchtop studies with that. The second one is our clinical prototype, which we developed based on the learning from here. We went out of our way to do a lot of benchtop testing to make sure that it's safe for use in humans, and that is the one that we used to collect like 50, 100 patients, more than 150 patients. And the last one is our current prototype. It's the design control prototype. It has all the right documentation that you would need for an FDA submission. It's basically a derivative of this, but with more bells and whistles. It looks pretty. The usability is quite enhanced. The signals look way more, user-friendly. But that's where we are at, and I thought I would show you, the whole journey, and this is where we have landed. In the next few months, we're trying to actually submit this and the documentation associated with it to the FDA. So let's see how that goes. But yes, that's all from me. Any questions?
So with the pivot from ML to statistical models, how are you finding the accuracy? And second, how much faster is it for your use case?
Faster in terms of when you're getting an output?
Yeah, I don't know if inference speed was necessarily an issue, but I mean, presumably it's less resource.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, because our data set isn't as big, machine learning versus traditional methods didn't really pose any challenges around speed of development. I think your original question was the accuracy difference. I think it was about a 5% hit that we got, but there's still ways that we can improve if we're collecting more data and we're seeing ways. But yeah, it wasn't that bad. I mean, I was worried it's going to be that bad, but it wasn't, which I'm glad.
With the regulatory approvals that you have to seek, I assume that you have to compile a lot of documents and do you have an external support in doing that, or was it all your doing that?
No. So we're just 12 people. Like, we're quite lean, and we only have like 3 engineers in the team. I do all of the software development, and I had to get trained into 63 or 4. But a lot of our other engineering work, a lot of our regulatory work, quality work, clinical work is outsourced to different firms. Found that the Australian firms are okay. The American firms are way better because they've done it so often. With Australian firms, or with any firm in general, when you're working with them, I think you got to know the risks and you got to know how to manage them.
And one more question. So I see that X-ray is going to, like X-ray technology is going to be a key part in validating your data and being able to use ML more efficiently. So have you looked into new advancements in X-ray technology that can help you?
Like machine learning and all that, like that.
Soft X-rays which are not INSL as much as your hard X-rays, which could help you validate or which could help you label your data in fact.
So the type of technology, type of X-ray technology being used is really a function of the hospitals that you go to. You can't go beyond what they already use. You can try to introduce it in, but that's like under your of a
So maybe just extending that, right? You're saying that you can measure at every centimeter, maybe like the feedback, latency. So is that what you're talking about, the limitation on the hospital equipment?
So when I said centimeter measurements, I mean that as the catheter goes in, there are actually markings on the catheter. So you can see the marking on the outside and you'd be like, okay, it's 5 centimeters in, 4 centimeters in. So the idea was that at every centimeter, you collect an ECG segment, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And then on the X-ray, even though you're only looking at the tip location of the final point or the final insertion depth, but you can sort of extrapolate the remaining ones just by doing centimeter measurements on the X-ray itself to know, because you're still taking the ECG readings, right?
Yeah.
And you still have the X-ray, so you can use the image in more ways than possible ways.
My question is around like the unlabeled data sets, because I find that really fascinating. You like smoke techniques and all that stuff. So did you go into like, because you're saying you use proxies to kind of identify signals for that. So do you look in like PCA and kind of find other signals that could be meaningful that you didn't think you can expect to be good?
So one of the AI technique that we kept in, that we didn't get rid of when the FDA told us, and there's no reason to get rid of it, is some of the principal component analysis and some of the feature analysis that you can do using machine learning techniques. That actually helped us figure out, well, because it's an ECG, you have P waves, QRS waves, like you get a very nice waveform and there are different characteristics of it. You have amplitudes, you have durations, you have shapes. So many things that you can take out of it and you can try to characterize them based on, like you can use different techniques to figure out which features are sort of the best ones. So yeah, we did use some techniques there.
Shall we?
Well, I just want to say, if you're submitting in the next month, as I'm at the exact same stage, it's no mean feat doing 62304 regulatory software development practices, so I feel you. Thank you so much for your talk. It's really interesting hearing about all the techniques that you've applied. I did have one question. So you use PCA to do the feature extraction, and then you use those features to then do more traditional modelling.
Yes, so not exactly PCA, but that was one of the techniques that helped me focus on the right. Because the one good thing about this was that I was actually present in the clinical settings. So when I would go into the clinical settings, I can actually see a lot of the things that you weren't able to record because of constraints on data recording. Like I would see exactly at each second how the ECG would change. So I had acquired some, how do you say it, like knowledge that wasn't documented. So I used some of that as well to figure out the features. But then there were obvious features that you can just do qualitative analysis on them. You'd be like, okay, the period is changing differently, the QRS is changing differently, and you can use that. But the PCAs and some of the machine learning techniques really help you focus on the right feature.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you everyone for coming to our last meetup of the year. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out. We usually go to the Emeralds, Sainton Rogue, Rouge. We're Rogue, we'll be Rogue around in the Sainton Rouge. So yeah, please do come along. We'll probably pack up around here pretty quickly. But yeah, we'll head around the corner, and please do reach out on social media or anything to any one of us, or just to Deep Tech specifically. We are also always looking for...
Yes, exactly what you're going to say.
We are also always looking for speakers and even people who want to contribute and get involved and help out organise events. I'm actually going to be going away for a few months, so if anybody does want to help out, please do lend a hand to my friends over here.
It's despite what you may think, it's all going to collapse.
Okay.
Probably.
But yeah, thank you and have a great night.
Thank you. Hey, okay, cool.